Hi guys, Max here, and today we're going to talk about just a few updates regarding what's happened over the last couple of days. We'll look a little bit into the economy of Russia and how sanctions are working, and then just cover a couple other pieces of news. I did miss yesterday's video. I had something come up unfortunately, so we'll start very briefly with the state of the markets as we left them on Friday evening. So what actually happened? Well, markets fell once more on fears surrounding the war in Ukraine. The big issue this time was that a nuclear power plant was being bombed by the Russians, and the potential for a reactor meltdown or something like that, which might just be some kind of weird indirect way for Russia to use a dirty bomb on Ukraine, was very fear-inducing. It also represented just an escalation to the conflict in general, and so markets weren't happy with it at all, and they fell across the board. American equities fell a little bit less than European ones. They're further detached from Ukraine and Europe itself, physically by just being further away, but also by being a little bit less economically connected as well. The S&P 500 fell 0.8% by the end of the day, but it did drop down almost as low as 2% at some points. The Nasdaq behaved in the same way, declining 1.7% by the end of the day, but with dips as low as more than 2% at some points. In Europe though, things were way worse and the indices fell by loads. The FTSE 100 was down by 3.6% and it was down the entire day, no mini rallies to speak of. The DAX was even worse, falling by 4.4%, and the Stoxx 600 fell by 3.5% as well. These are really major falls for broad-based indexes. European markets had actually been performing comparatively quite well compared to US markets for the first couple of months of 2022. The impacts of the Fed's tightening being the major cause of major routes, but as Ukraine has kicked off, European markets have now been getting hammered as well. Now, the FTSE 100 actually just had its worst week of performance since the absolute bottom of the pandemic crash, and other markets have had similar performances, if not quite as dramatic. In currencies, once again, it was a strong day for the dollar, being seen as safer than other major currencies and getting lots of inflows. The euro, the pound, the yen are all sitting at actually pretty low levels compared to where they have been in recent months. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is actually justified. I think the effect and influence of the sanctions put into place by the West has been amplified by Russia's reliance on the dollar, and we're already seeing Russia, China, and India make steps to reduce their reliance on the US dollar for the future because of this. In the long run, this should actually be bad for the US dollar, and it could lead to the end of the dollar as the world reserve currency over time. I actually made a video about Russia de-dollarizing their economy about 6 months ago, and I called it Russia preparing for a black swan event because we didn't know what that event that they were preparing for was, just that Russia was preparing for it, and lo and behold, it turned out to be an invasion of Ukraine. Now, if you never saw that video, I do recommend you go back and watch it. Link will be down below in the description because it actually really preempted all of this chaos with Russia and Ukraine, and it gives some great context into how Russia tried to prepare for all of these sanctions. Now, to clarify my points about the dollar being unnecessarily strong, I get paid in dollars really. I'm British, I live in the UK, but my audience is mostly American and I mostly work with American companies. So the dollar being stronger against the pound means that I actually make more money, and yet I still think it's just a little bit irrational and unjustified. Now, in the bond markets, in line with what was going on in equity markets, investors were de-risking their portfolios, so there were lots of inflows into bonds and yields fell across the board by about 10 basis points. The US 10-year Treasury fell 10 basis points and now sits at 1.74%, a comparatively low figure compared to the last few months, and the German 10-year is once again in negative yield territory. Gold prices moved in that same direction and rose almost 2% yesterday alone, and it now sits at a very high price of $1,970 an ounce. This is actually a little bit upsetting to me because a couple of months ago I started buying into gold, increasing my exposure to it, hedging against the Federal Reserve allowing inflation to take hold, and I was hoping to have more time to buy while the price was around $1,800 an ounce, but no such luck. Finally, in the world of oil, prices are obviously stupidly high, and it's worrying people because we don't know if they're going to go back down. As of right now, Brent crude oil costs about $118 a barrel and WTI costs about $115 a barrel, so both are super high still. This is largely because right now supply is actually quite limited as loads of companies aren't working with Russia anymore. The oil coming out of Russia right now was put on the market at a $25 a barrel discount compared to the open market, and still there were no buyers. It was only after that discount reached $28 a barrel that Shell bought it, at which point they saw huge amounts of condemnation, so Shell then had to commit to donating all of the profits from that trade to the Ukrainian war fund. Sanctions and really the court of public opinion is making it really hard for Russia to sell their oil, and that means less supply, so prices are really damn high. Now, what else has happened in this new post-Ukrainian war world? Well, a big move by two of the most important and dominant companies in the world was just seen. Visa and MasterCard will both be cancelling their operations in Russia. That means almost every single debit card and credit card issued in Russia will no longer work outside of the country. This will cost both of these companies about 4% of their revenues as well, so not exactly good for them, but it's not going to kill them either. We should be expecting a minor dip in their share price when markets reopen after the weekend. Now, the details don't seem 100% clear, but it appears as though Visa and MasterCard will not be processing these transactions that happen in Russia, and they will instead have to be processed by Russia's national payment card system. Now, this system is probably going to see a lot of stress, far more usage than usual, and it probably will see a lot of problems as this usage explodes overnight. Now, Elon Musk has been in the news for sending Starlink equipment to Ukraine to help the government stay connected, and this is really good news, and it's also great publicity for Elon and Starlink. Now, I have seen a couple of videos from the ground in Ukraine, and the connection is there, it's working, and it's insanely good, and of course, it doesn't rely on traditional infrastructure that could easily be destroyed by Russia. Now, the reason we didn't talk about this sooner is because Elon has a habit of making claims about helping during a time of crisis, but never actually doing what he promises, like with ventilators during COVID and that submarine thing when those kids got stuck in that Thai cave. So I wasn't going to talk about this until it was concrete, but it is now. This will be a major help to the Ukrainian government. It will provide them with some much needed security for their connectivity, and it's great to see, so thank you, Elon. Finally now, Russia is really unhappy about the state of affairs for them at home, and they're doing everything they can to stop these sanctions and stop the West from supporting Ukraine as well. Putin has claimed that the West has declared economic war on Russia, but I believe this is more like a special economic operation. He's also claimed that any country supplying weapons to Ukraine will be punished severely, apparently completely blind to the fact that we, the West, have been supplying weapons to Ukraine for months now, and those weapons have killed an awful lot of Russian soldiers. Finally, Putin has gone the way of a full-blown despot and has elected to imprison a WNBA player on trumped-up charges as some kind of bargaining tool. We see this stuff quite frequently with countries like Iran or North Korea or China, but not usually with Russia, but this does show how desperate they are and how urgently they are trying to find some kind of leverage. Now, we will be back again tomorrow, hopefully with a video giving a nice broad update on the situation on the ground in Ukraine. We have a couple very interesting things to look at regarding Russia in particular as well. A leaked report from a member of the FSB, which is the Federal Security Service of Russia. It's basically the successor to the KGB. It's the Russian equivalent of CIA or MI6. And either way, there's a very interesting document leaked from a member of the FSB that shows just how much turmoil the country is in right now. As usual, if you don't want to watch that video, you don't have to. You live in a free country, probably. Also, very quickly, there's going to be a new channel coming out from this brand. Stoic Politics is going to be putting out videos in a couple of weeks. It's going to be focused, as you might imagine, on politics. I'll be starting it with a friend of mine who you will meet shortly, and we'll be covering just general politics from the US, from the Anglosphere, and the rest of the world as well. So if you like the kind of videos that we put out here, but you're interested in politics as well, then make sure to go and subscribe to that channel so you don't miss out when we start rolling those videos out. Link, as always, is down below in the description. If you enjoyed this video, then leave a like and a comment to bless the YouTube algorithm. If you want more content like this, then check out our Patreon and join our community of investors. You get access to our Discord, loads of exclusive content like insight into my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. There's a link in the description to masterworks.io, a site that allows you to buy fractional shares of art from world-famous artists like Banksy, which can be a great way to diversify your portfolio with non-market correlated assets. It's completely free to sign up, so if that sounds interesting, then make sure to check it out. There's also a link in the description to BlockFi, which will give you up to $250 in free Bitcoin when you use it. You can also get 9% interest on stablecoins like USDC, which is a far higher rate than you get from any savings account these days. Just make sure not to use Tether. Thank you all for the support. Thanks for watching. Stay stoic. Until next time.